Number 10, The Gardener. In October 2012, a man took his parasocial relationship way too far when he decided to jump into Miley Cyrus's garden with a giant pair of scissors. 40-year-old Jason Luis Rivera thought that just because he'd watched the pop sensation perform multiple times that he had permission to just barge his way into her LA home. Oh, and instead of walking up to her front door, he chose to climb over the fence because that's what friends do, right? Well, at least he didn't come in like a wrecking ball. Here's the weirdest part, though. Not only did he have a huge pair of scissors in his hands, but he was also just sitting in the garden and lighting a bunch of candles. Now, whether this was a homemade shrine or some other voodoo ritual, no one really knows. When he was asked to leave by the guard, he just ignored the guy and kept mumbling that he'd been a friend of Miley's for 5 years, which gets even stranger when you consider the fact that the singer was only 19 at the time. Thankfully, he wasn't violent, so the police just came down to the Studio City house and arrested him. Also, his pop star friend wasn't even home during the unannounced arrival. Funnily enough, when police pulled out the red tie tucked under his shirt, a big red heart came out. Yeah, definitely some strange stuff was going on there. Jason was charged with 2 counts of trespassing and ordered to stay 500 yards, or just about a half kilometer, away from Miley and her house. Number 9, The Unforgivable. In 2014, a stalker managed to break his way into Sandra Bullock's home with a twisted and evil intention. The Gravity star was at her home in LA with her son when she heard someone break in through the door. As soon as she saw the big burly man approach her in the bedroom, she locked herself in and hid inside a nearby closet. Thankfully, Sandra had a phone on her to call 911, but while she held her breath and waited for the police to arrive, Corbett kept banging on the door asking her to come out. With the bangs getting increasingly more violent and the frustration building up in his voice, Bullock thought that she was definitely going to die. The police arrived just in the nick of time, though, and arrested the man, whose angry demands quickly turned into feeble apologies, saying, quote, "Sandy, I'm sorry, please don't press charges," end quote. It was soon discovered later in an investigation that Corbett didn't break into the actor's house for a simple meet and greet. He was actually there to sexually assault her. In fact, he had a notebook on him filled with cutout pictures of her and creepy handwritten notes. The situation at his home wasn't great either. Police found over 20 firearms in his possession. Owing to mental health issues, though, he was sent to a facility instead of prison. But only a few years after the incident, he took his own life during a police standoff after they threatened to arrest him again. Number 8, I Knew You Were in Trouble. In 2015, a stalker took being an aggressive fan way past his threshold as he set out to kill Taylor Swift and her whole family. 39-year-old Frank Edward Hoover's obsession with the pop star started off mild as he began a delusion in his head that he was her boyfriend. But when reality came crashing down with his failed attempts to reach out to the young star, he turned into a monster. Not only did he send her father Scott Swift disturbing letters promising to kill their entire family, he also started to refer to himself as the real son of God. Oh, and guess who the devils were in his story? Yep, the Swifts. In fact, he wrote an entire 100-page article about why they deserve to die and burn. Does that sound sane to you? That being said, he wasn't just an online troll sending hate mail. Things got real when he followed her and her family from a concert venue to the airport. He got as close as 25 feet or just under 8 meters to her car before Taylor's bodyguards swooped in and questioned him. His creepy response, though, was that he just wanted to get a photo with her and possibly, quote, accompany Taylor wherever she goes. But once he was identified as Frank Hoover, police took him into custody and he was sentenced to 10 years probation. Number 7, you've got to be kidding me. In 2017, a stalker's attempts to seduce Keira Knightley with his music turned a bit dark when he began terrorizing her entire family. 50-year-old Mark Revell was apparently in love with the Pirates of the Caribbean actor, so much so that he was willing to ignore the fact that she was married and had a 2-year-old daughter. He started off delivering handwritten letters to the actress's home and lurking outside just to see her. This obviously made Keira super paranoid about stepping outside. In fact, on one strange occasion, he showed up at her house and started meowing through the letterbox, which eventually turned into her husband James Wrighton chasing him away. Oh, and he also left her a USB drive with music about cats on it, which, according to the actor's lawyers, was incredibly bizarre and out of the ordinary. After the whole meowing incident, though, Revell started turning aggressive and even tweeted out threats aimed at her husband. In one of his tweets, he called Wrighton the devil and referred to himself as the public executioner. Having said that, though, the stalker actually had a history of doing creepy stuff. He was once convicted of turning up nude at a woman's house, so after things started to escalate, police finally got involved and arrested him once again. Revell was then diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia and sent to the hospital for indefinite periods of time. Thankfully, Keira doesn't have to deal with any stray cats That's for now. Number 6, too late to say sorry. In 2012, a convicted criminal came up with an elaborate plan to kidnap and castrate Justin Bieber after he didn't respond to a fan mail letter. Dana Martin, who'd been serving life in New Mexico for rape and murder, was apparently in love with the teen pop sensation and even had him tattooed on his leg. But those feelings turned sour when the Canadian star didn't reply to his numerous letters. This, along with the fact that he perceived himself as a huge nobody in prison, resulted in one of the most disturbing stalking plots of all time. Dana linked up with fellow inmate Mark Stackey and his nephew Tanner Ruane to make a plan. They devised to kidnap Bieber during his stay in New York. They had 4 targets, including the star's bodyguard and the Biebster himself. Oh, and they weren't just going to straight up kill the singer. Instead, the plan was to castrate him, sell off his testicles, and then murder him in cold blood. Thankfully, though, before they could even set their plan into motion, Martin turned both himself and his partners into the police. And while his decision may have spared Bieber's life, his feelings toward the singer didn't change at all. For example, in a disturbing interview with The Atlantic a year later, he outlined his sick fantasies by saying that if he was free, he'd put the star in a cage, molest him, and put out videos on YouTube. The maniac was given 2 consecutive life sentences in prison. Number 5, serial stalker. In October 2009, a woman showed up to Justin Timberlake's house claiming she knew him and the two were going to get married. 50-year-old Karen McNeil's downward spiral into delusion isn't something you see every day, but the fact that she showed up at the singer's house multiple times should have rung a couple of alarm bells. She claimed that she was God herself, and the only reason she was even stalking Timberlake in the first place was because they were destined to rule the universe together. Also, in one of her other strange spiels, she said that she was in danger because, quote, Babylon witches were trying to cast an evil spell on her, so she had to marry the singer and live with him in order to ward them off. Oh, and one time, Karen showed up at Justin's home with a taxi full of her personal possessions, like she was ready to move in with him. But after this incident, her behavior was deemed so crazy enough to warrant arrest. She was then handed a restraining order. Interestingly enough, this wasn't her first offense. She was also arrested for stalking Guns N' Roses singer Axl Rose. Even after she was banned from his house, Karen kept sending him love letters. So yeah, she definitely had a knack for doing this sort of thing and falling in love with musicians. Number 4, Material Girl. Madonna has had her fair share of obsessive fans during her long and illustrious career, but back in the 90s, one of her superfans turned into a violent criminal. Robert Dewey Hoskins, like most stalkers, started sending love letters to the singer, but things really went from 0 to 100 when he tried to invade her home. For him, it was either marriage or bust. No, seriously, he once made his way into her house and threatened to slit her throat from ear to ear if she didn't marry him. Madonna, on the other hand, felt sick to her stomach that she was even in the same room as the crazed man. In fact, she actually had nightmares about him chasing her, which just shows how traumatic some of these events can be. Oddly enough, his actions continued for years as he somehow managed to escape every single time. Thankfully, his luck finally ran out when he jumped on the fence of her Hollywood Hills home and the singer's security team shot him down. Robert was then sentenced to 10 years in prison for stalking and threatening. At the conclusion of his sentence, he wasn't released because the jury deemed it necessary to send him to a mental institution. To this day, Robert still has his Houdini abilities as he somehow continues to escape from custody time and time again. Number 3, waiting at home. In 2018, a stalker climbed a fence, turned off the alarm system, and made his way into Rihanna's home to try and have sex with her. 27-year-old Eduardo Leon was obsessed with Queen Riri, and to be fair, who wouldn't be? But he took things 12 steps too far as he started looking for ways to break into her house and sleep with the global sensation. Now, it seems like he really knew his way around the place since he disabled the alarms. Essentially, he was there without anybody knowing it. Thankfully, though, Rihanna herself was in New York at the time for the launch of her new lingerie brand. That said, Eduardo still somehow managed to spend 12 hours in her home when the singer's assistant finally stumbled upon him chilling in the living room. He was then tased, arrested, and charged with stalking, burglary, and vandalism. Oh, and in a strange admission, he said he was waiting for her to come back so that they could sleep together. This wasn't his first rodeo either. Apparently, he'd broken into another house in the neighborhood thinking it was Rihanna's. Eduardo was then placed on 5 years probation, and a 10-year restraining order was put upon him with no jail time. Number 2, no friends here. In July 2010, a man traveled all the way from Pennsylvania to LA to try and kidnap the acclaimed actress Jennifer Aniston. 24-year-old Jason Payton was seriously deluded. He genuinely believed he was dating the Friends star. What's more, he claimed he was on a mission to marry her and was ready to do anything to turn that fantasy into a reality. So he packed his bags and got on a plane that flew straight to Los Angeles. While his plan was to kidnap the actor and take her with him, he didn't actually know where to find her. As a result, he spent 8 days wandering around the Hollywood Hills hoping he'd somehow stumble upon Jennifer. But before he could follow through on his terrifying plan, his mother outed him by alerting the police. After his arrest, authorities found a sharp object, duct tape, and a card that had love messages for Aniston carved all over it. So yeah, he was definitely there fully intending to kidnap her. Apparently, Jason had a criminal history of assault, especially against his mother. Plus, he was on antipsychotic drugs. For some reason, Jason also fully believed he was related to Courtney Cox and Donald Trump. The man really wasn't all there. He was placed on a psychiatric hold while the actor got a temporary restraining order against him. Number 1. Double Trouble. Keanu Reeves had been the social media's darling boy for a few years now, but back in 2014, a couple fans took their love for him too far. The Matrix star was asleep at his Hollywood Hills home when he heard a commotion outside the bedroom, so he got up and set out to find whatever was causing all the noise. And surprise, surprise, there was just some random woman in his library. We didn't know what she was doing or even hoping to find there, but Reeves definitely got the shock of his life seeing her standing there. She was quickly arrested and taken into hospital for mental evaluation. Now, oddly enough, this triggered a frenzy of fans trying to break into Keanu's home. In fact, only 2 days after the incident, another superfan walked straight in after a cleaning team left the gate open. But instead of trying to impress the star with her brains in the library, she decided to swim naked in his pool instead, hoping he'd fall for her beauty. Thankfully, before she could really do something strange, someone in the crew spotted her and told authorities. So, much like the previous stalker, she was also sent away. Thanks for watching. Would you trade your life to become a rich and famous star even if it meant you'd get mobbed by fans and stalkers? Tell us in the comments below and don't forget to subscribe. See you next time on The Bad Badger.